Okay, so I'm Louise Larson. I run August Consulting, and located in Rumson, New Jersey, but I work with kids from parts and helping them guide them on the road to college and hopefully get a good fit and a good match and have a thriving college career. So I'm going to open this up because normally I do these like at the beginning of the month, and I was collecting all this information for October. And finally, I was like, I'm getting overrun with information. So I need to just do one now and get everything out while because I'm just getting it. The information is coming fast and furious. And I got all this material pulled together for today. And then there was all this news this morning about the new upgraded US News and World Report rankings, which I'll touch on briefly, but that'll probably be more for October. So I'm going to open this up. This book, Who Gets In and Why, is by a guy named Jeffrey Salingo, and he is a leader in the field. He has an amazing podcast called Future You. He has an amazing newsletter called Next. He's written this book that got a lot of press, Who Gets In and Why. He is a guy who is at the center and the crossroads of all of this. And here is his quote from this past spring. He says, this is Jeff Salingo saying this. This is a confusing process. Sometimes I don't even know what advice to give people because it is incredibly confusing. You are not alone out there, that is for sure. So when this guy says it's confusing, who's a real guru in the field, I thought I would open with that because the news is coming so quickly. So Jeff Salingo, I will share with you, he's writing a sequel to this book that will be out in 2025 called Dream Schools, the College Admissions Playbook for the Rest of Us. But he has a great newsletter called Next. So if you go to just Google Jeff Salingo and Next, you can get signed up for his newsletter, which is a great resource. So the first thing I will do is I will tell on myself that I am in the process of shepherding one of my own biological children through law school admissions, and I violated one of my rules, which is when you go to admissions office, you don't talk, only the student talks. And sure enough, we were in an admissions office and they started asking questions and I just started to talk and I was like, God. But then I caught myself at the next law school. And I tell parents, like, when you go on a college visit, just be quiet and don't say anything. Just let them kind of sort this out. And we went to law school number 2 after I'd opened my mouth at law school number 1. And we hadn't even got across the parking lot. And in my head, I was like, I like this one. I like this one better than the last one. Do you like this one? Fortunately, this was all in my head. I knew to just shut my mouth, but I kept wanting to say, I think this one's better. Do you think this one's better? We hadn't even gone up the walk. So I just share that to say that, it is a hard process. It's a hard process to parent. So, all right, so here we go. So I did a webinar in July after all the news from the Supreme Court. So I want to talk about the Supreme Court a little bit. I want to talk about artificial intelligence, and I want to talk about football and how all of this doesn't quite intersect necessarily, but it is all impacting college admissions. So the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action could not be used in college admissions in July, at the exact same time that a guy named Raj Chetty put out a report from the Harvard Opportunity Insights. And Raj Chetty's data, and there's been so much information about this in the press, I'm sure you've seen it, around legacy admissions, wealthy applicants, and how really, really wealthy schools are not supporting under-resourced applicants. So everything that I talk about is on my Facebook, either Two River College Consulting or my August Consulting Facebook page. Every article that I reference is there. And if you need some direction on that, you can send me an email saying which one was which. But from July, after the SCOTUS case came out, the decision came out, there was a huge amount of press about legacy admissions, what a big leg wealthy applicants have in college admissions, a big leg up, and then a whole lot of press about how the wealthiest schools are not supporting under-resourced students. One of the litmus tests of an under-resourced student is, do they qualify for a Pell Grant, where the government actually gives them, I think, like $6,500 in tuition money. And a school like Caltech has an endowment of $5 million, almost $5 million per student, and less than their student population, less than 10% of their student population is Pell eligible. So they're one of the richest schools doing the most minimal work with under-resourced families. So this has been in the news the second half of July, all of August, all of into September, in the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. So what does that mean for applicants these days? Well, I think that both sides of the argument, if you are pro the Supreme Court decision or against it, both those sides are watching this very closely and will be taking steps to perhaps legally challenge decisions that schools are making from either end. So I don't think that it is going to be an easy time to be these colleges. The other impact of this is, if you have a senior writing applications right now, I shouldn't say every, but supplements left and right are all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which the reality is, they're asking questions like, tell us about your lived experience. And, if you're on this webinar, maybe you can talk about your lived experience, but like children talking about their lived experience, I'm finding it very challenging for some kids. Not everybody has a deep, meaningful experience around some of these things. So I'm finding that every essay, and my editor, who, she's like, oh my gosh, one more of them. It's nothing but that. So that's where the impact is for current applicants. And I think that there's a real light on these schools of how they're handling ultra wealthy applicants, and the advantages that they're being given. So the other piece that I will talk about is artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is getting a lot of press in college admissions right now. Kids, some schools, I think one of them said right on their thing, if you're going to use artificial intelligence, please tell us here how you used it. Some of them, colleges on their writing, are saying you may not use artificial intelligence, and you've got to sign here that you're not using it. But the thing about artificial intelligence that I would not advise people writing essays right now to use is that college admissions people read thousands of essays, and I've heard more than one say across the board, I know AI can look so great when you've written something or you've used it to write something and it seems so good, but those AI pieces just fall flat. So I think that when people are just reading these 60-second essays over and over and over, an AI piece really can fall flat. I wouldn't recommend it. And in fact, I think next October, my October webinar is going to be more around writing and what to do and not to do. Because at the end of the day, this writing should sound like a high school kid wrote it. And that means it shouldn't sound like, it was from somebody who writes for foreign affairs, unless everything else in the file looks like this kid writes for foreign affairs. And those kids exist, but most kids don't write that way. So I would stay away from AI and not think that's some great solution. So when we go back to the football component of the news, and I put in my Facebook page like a history of the football conferences consolidating and shifting. That is something that really impacts college admissions. They say there's no bad press, and college football is big press for admissions offices. It's creating a little bit of a scramble. For example, you can imagine that Colorado Boulder applications are going to go through the roof. I can't imagine that more and more people aren't going to be applying there. And I've been carrying in the morning for about 5 years a Colorado Boulder Yeti for hot coffee. And no one has ever asked me about it. Nobody has ever said, did you go to Boulder? Anything till this fall. I have people asking me all the time, oh, where'd you get your Boulder Yeti? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So you can imagine that with that type of press that they're getting, there's going to be a lot of applications. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So many of the football, many Southern schools have, if they're public, they have like a cap, like UVA is has to, I think it has to be 1/3, 2/3 in state, 1/3 out of state. I think Chapel Hill, off the top of my head, has only 18% can be out of state. So a lot of these schools have caps. Georgia put one in a couple years ago. 5-6 years ago, it was a completely different thing to get into Georgia. Now it's much more challenging to get into Georgia. To give you an example, the one school that was doing things a little differently was Texas Austin. Texas Austin had a plan. They put it into place years ago that they were going to take the top 10% from top 10% of ranked students from public schools. They've had to lower that over the years. The last time I heard, I think it's about 6%. So that's a different way to do it. And 2 schools have decided to do that. They didn't put a ratio cap in like UVA or Georgia. University of South Carolina and University of Tennessee, Knoxville are doing the top 10%. And one of them, UTK, Tennessee, Knoxville, is also giving automatic admission to any Tennessee resident with a 4.0. And one of them, I forget if it was South Carolina or Tennessee, is also including kids from private schools in those numbers. So Tennessee, Knoxville went through the roof last year with applications. I mean, I think by February, they were up 50%. And they anticipate their student body has gone from like 33,000 to 36,000. They anticipate being able to offer admission to 6,400 Tennessee kids just out of the gate. So all of a sudden, again, you got a big shift in schools that 3 to 5 years ago, if you were a reasonably good student and wanted to go to kind of that Southern football flagship, all of a sudden, that is a really big shift. In the same vein, I mean, I'm based in New Jersey, and Rutgers is going on the Common App this year, which means that they're anticipating going from 40,000 applications to over 60,000. And the old New Jersey kid adage, maybe I'll just go to Rutgers, is going to be over. And what maybe kids from New Jersey don't realize is that if you're not from New Jersey, Rutgers has big football. You're a stone's throw from New York City. So there's some elements of Rutgers that New Jersey kids might take for granted that out-of-state kids might be like, wow, it's on the Common App. I'll just send them an application. So football, again, not that the football conferences have impact. Rutgers is a different story, but when kids want a school with football, Rutgers could certainly be in the equation. Close to that, but not exactly in that field, is West Virginia University. There's a lot of news around West Virginia. And when kids, if I had a kid come to me and they wanted maybe like a South Carolina and they didn't quite have the grades for it, something that might be in the mix for them could be West Virginia University, which is the flagship of West Virginia. And a lot of parents might look at me with 2 heads when I suggest that, but it really is a little bit of a hidden gem. It's actually right on the Pennsylvania-Ohio border. It's only 6 hours from where I am in New Jersey. They've got big football, they've got mountains, they've got arts. It's a little bit of a hidden gem that you could actually get into, and it offers a fair amount of affordability too. So what happened in the middle of the summer was West Virginia announced some draconian cuts in their academic programs, including eliminating all language study, which is a shame. And if you're from out of state, you think, okay, maybe I won't look at that. But the real shame in that is if you are an under-resourced kid, nothing is going to offer the affordability that your state schools will. first of all, right out of the gate, they're going to be cheaper for you. They might offer you some scholarship money. So if you're a kid in West Virginia that's under-resourced and you really like French or one of the other programs that's been cut, all of a sudden, like, that's not maybe an option for you anymore. And that's really a shame. There was a massive outcry. There was a no confidence vote in the president, but just last Friday, they voted and they cut everything. I think they kept some language minors, and I think they arranged for Chinese and Spanish to be done virtually. But I share those cuts to say, I do think that West Virginia is a little bit of a canary in the coal mine. A lot of colleges that had to maybe face some cuts got enough COVID money that they didn't have to. University of Vermont put a couple of cuts into their programs. They weren't quite as draconian as West Virginia. Like, one of the things they got rid of was like Caribbean studies. And I was like, okay, maybe if you want to like really dig into Caribbean studies, Vermont is not the place to do it. So the Vermont programs, you could look at and say they were a little under, maybe underutilized or not, logical to where they are geographically. But I think that more colleges are going to be facing things like West Virginia was facing, which is hard. Okay, so that is kind of like the whole SCOTUS football artificial intelligence. The FAFSA normally opens October 1st. It's opening December 1st this year because they are overhauling the system. There's going to be no discount for a second child in college on the FAFSA, but the profile schools will still take into account that you have 2 children in college. The expected family contribution will now be called the Student Aid Index. The student academic record will be called the FAFSA submission summary. I'm sorry, the student aid record will be called the FAFSA submission summary. Appeals should be easier. December 1st, if you're applying early decision, will not give you time to submit the FAFSA, but schools will do a read off the profile or give you a read if they're not a profile school. Wall Street Journal put out their own ranking system released on September 6th. Very different results from U.S. News and World Report. Theirs came out just now, just this morning there was news of that, and they've done an overhaul too. I will caution you on rankings. Rankings are subjective. I mean, if you have 3 kids and you rank them by height or age or GPA, I mean, you would rank them on, it's going to be a different lineup every which way you rank them. So I don't think that rankings are bad. I just wouldn't live and die by rankings. I would just use them as a tool to guide you a little bit, not say this school is 5 spots better than that one, and therefore it is much better. I would just use them as a looser guide. I heard a very interesting thing in a webinar that I was in. Your child's report card is not their transcript. And it is not a bad idea to get a copy of your child's transcript and see exactly what it says. And every school has to send out the school profile to the college. So they're sending a transcript and a profile. And it would be very good to look at the transcript and look at the profile and make sure that the school's profile is accurate, because somebody had a very good point that the school was listing advanced math, and they asked the kid, why didn't you take the advanced math? And the kid said, well, they don't offer that anymore, but the profile hadn't been updated. So not a bad thing to look at your child's actual transcript and the profile. Make sure everything's accurate. Interesting, Yale, for the second time, the class of 2025 and the class of 2027 are both over-enrolled. What does that mean? When a school over-enrolls, you can be reasonably sure that the next couple of years, as that possum moves through the python, they might take smaller classes. This has happened in recent years at the University of Tampa. Virginia Tech are just 2 examples. So it's always interesting to keep an ear to the ground in the spring to hear who was over-enrolled, because that means probably moving forward, maybe they're going to be taking smaller classes. There was a very good article about the musical chairs of flagship out-of-state student exchange. Every flagship, not every, I shouldn't say that, but many flagships are heavily recruiting out-of-state students. So why? They bring more money. So that creates less space for the in-state students. So then those in-state students are looking to be recruited maybe at other out-of-state schools. It was a very good article I posted it on my Facebook page, and it focuses on University of Alabama. And they talk about the history about how the author actually went to Vanderbilt. And when they went to Vanderbilt 20 years ago, the admit rate was 50%, and there was a big Greek life. And slowly over the years, Vanderbilt has become more and more selective to the point that they're in the single digit selectivity rate. And they've really not eliminated, but really diminished their Greek life. So now kids that were looking for that Vandy experience that, they can get in and it's going to be fun. Well, they're going to Alabama because Alabama is welcoming them with open arms and they've got big Greek life. Vanderbilt had a yield in 2021 of 40%. So that means of their admitted students, that they admitted 1,000 students, 400 accepted. They are pushing that to 60% is their goal this year. They went from 40% to 48% to 53% to 55%. Their goal is 60% yield. Well, if they get a bigger yield, they can admit less kids. They become more selective. Vanderbilt, to their credit, in the early decision round, was a school that they had a strict admit deny policy. So if you had applied early decision to Vanderbilt, the decision was you're admitted or you're denied. There was no deferral. So one of their tools to get to greater yield is to actually defer kids in the early decision round. So that's something new that will be happening at Vanderbilt this year. This fall is the last paper SAT. And next year is the rollout of the online SAT. One of the questions out there is, are schools going to allow kids to super score in between the paper and the online test? Nobody really knows. It's not entirely clear. The only thing I do know definitively is that Princeton has said they will not. So that's the one thing we know. There is a great podcast by Lee Coffin. Lee Coffin is the director of admissions for Dartmouth University, for Dartmouth College. It's called Admissions Beat. He just walks through all the nuts and bolts of college admissions. If you are wondering about athletic recruiting, he had a really good piece on, is either late spring or summer, with the Dartmouth acting athletic director, all about how recruiting proceeds and what the steps are. Interestingly, he said he thinks that the Olympic/country club sports and recruiting are on their way out. He just said, it's not sustainable to have these little niche sports and kids have access to recruiting spots. Right. Anything else here? Forbes magazine has a new guy writing for them called Scott White. He wrote a piece called Silent Revolution, and he just had a piece out today on work and the importance of work, actual labor in college admissions, how meaningful that can be. He's actually New Jersey based. He's been doing in this field for 40 years. Sounds like he's up in the Morristown area. It's a very good column. And the last thing, in the same vein that came out from all of the data on college admissions, and the New York Times had a piece on what an advantage male applicants have in a lot of application pools. Not the tech pools, not like Worcester Poly or Caltech or MIT. If anything, in those tech schools, females might have a little bit of an edge, but really in most schools, they are fighting to keep their ratios, on some sort of even keel. They featured Tulane and University of Vermont that both ended up with classes that were a little uneven, 1/3 male, 2/3 female. So Young men definitely in certain application pools have an advantage. So that is a whole bunch of news that was building, and I've got, again, there was more news today, so stay tuned for October. That's just kind of all the news and notes. So what I wanted to do, because I got a lot of juniors that are getting on the road trying to go see schools, and how do you start to sort out college visits? So where do you go? People say, how do I even start this? And I am a firm believer that you should start with what is near you. That's not necessarily the schools that your child is going to apply to or might even suit them, but sorting out what is near you that's small, medium, large, maybe in a little bit of an urban setting, maybe in a rural setting, but figuring out what is near you and then working from that. The best time to visit a college is really whenever you can. But if you have a choice, the best time to visit a college is when it's in session, probably on a weekday. If you can't get there on a weekday, a weekend. And if you can't get there when it's in session, you can certainly go see it and see if that campus has appeal to you. The reality of when families come to me, and most families come to me, if one or if not one, both parents work, there's more than one child, all of those children are doing different activities, and you start to figure out, well, where's a free weekend? And it can be very challenging. So if you are going to do a traditional visit where you sign up and actually take a tour, you would go to that college's website, go to admissions, somewhere there'll be a button about visiting, and you click and you figure out, when do they offer tours? Most people offer tours Monday to Friday. Some schools do Saturdays. Some schools, if you go on those, especially now in the fall, they will have like an open house day, like, Saturday, the whatever of October, come for a big campus open house. That can be a really good way to see a school too. Campus open houses do not usually happen in the spring. They are more reserved for admitted students to come experience the campus. So those are some ways that you can formally visit a campus. So when you visit a campus, a couple different things. You will probably have some sort of presentation from the school, maybe even a video. You want to quickly discern who are the adults in the room, who are the working students. Because if you have a very pointed question, if you have a very specific question, you want to make sure you're asking an actual employee of the school, not a kid who's running tours. An example of this would be, I have a parent with twins that want to go together, and he has very specific questions. If my twins apply early decision, will you take them both? Would you take one? Because if there's a chance that one could get in and one could not, maybe they won't do it. So that's like a very specific question, but that is an opportunity to ask those questions. So another suggestion, when you go on a tour, often there will be like a big presentation, and then they'll say, okay, we're going to break into smaller groups for tours. It is a fine option for you and your child to go on different tours. You do not have to be with them. And if you feel like that might give your child a little more room or space to explore and kind of take in the tour, that's fine. After the tour, you are fine, and I would suggest you walk around a little bit more, stop somewhere and get something to eat, grab a newspaper, talk to other students that are there. Try to get, like, what is the vibe on that campus? Do kids seem happy? Do kids seem like they're in groups? Are they in pairs? Take that into consideration. If you're there for finals week, maybe people are a little less social or a little less engaging. When you go on tours, you will see some things. And if you've been on more than 3 tours, by the 4th tour, you will start to say, okay, everybody has amazing food. Everybody has a gorgeous gym. Everybody has the blue light safety system that nobody ever needs. So there becomes a little bit of a sameness to the tours if you've done more than a couple, but that's okay. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do them. One of the questions your students should really ask themselves is the weather. Is the weather that day good? Is the weather that day bad? If it was really bad weather and you love the campus, that's a good sign that you could be there, in poor conditions and still really like it. If it's a gorgeous day, you got to ask yourself, how much did that impact my like or my dislike? Same question with the tour guides. Some tour guides are amazing. Some tour guides are not as engaging, and some tour guides really work for some kids in a way that they don't work for others. So you have to ask too, did I like this because the tour guide was so great, or was it because I don't like the school because I didn't like the tour guide, and kind of try to separate that. Some important questions to ask, like for your student to ask themselves, is what is the proximity to the outside world on this campus, and how much of a priority is that for me? Can I get to a pharmacy on foot? Is there public transport? Am I in miles of cornfields? And if I'm in miles of cornfields, maybe you really like that, and that's fine. But what is the proximity to the outside world? And does that work for me? Certainly a family decision, and the parents, everybody's going to have to kind of sort this out, is travel logistics. Some parents say, I do not want my child flying because it's too complicated, it's too expensive, and I want them to be driving distance. But if you live where I live in New Jersey, you could be in Miami or Chicago faster than you could be at Virginia Tech. There's really no way to get to Virginia Tech or Clarkson but to get in your car and start driving. And you could actually maybe get to some other schools by plane more easily than you could get to some schools by driving. So it's an important question. Some schools are a really quick flight from wherever you are. Some schools, I had somebody told me about their kid at Ole Miss. It was 2 airplane rides from New Jersey and then 2 hours in a rental car. So if that works for you, great. But really kind of trying on the travel logistics is important. Another idea, if you're going to visit a campus formally or informally, do you know anybody there? Does your neighbor go there? Does your cousin's friend go there? Is somebody the year ahead of you that was on the field hockey team, are they there? Could you ping them on social media and say, hey, could you meet up? I'm on campus. I'd love to say hello, and kind of get their vibe. You might find most kids on a college campus are pretty happy to talk to you about their school. The last tip for parents is to be quiet and watch your body language. If your child, and I know many of you might say, no, I don't believe you, but our children do listen to us in a way, maybe not overtly, but they do kind of take cues from us. And if you were on a campus, you will probably like most college campuses. They are all pretty nice. And if you have a big smile on your face, if your kid is on this college campus and is like, I don't think this is for me, but you have a giant smile on your face, they might be like, but my dad seems to like it, so maybe this is good. So you want to kind of be neutral. And like, you do not want to, like me walking into Albany Law School, grab your child by the neck and say, I think this is good. Do you think this is good? Before we've even really been on campus. And I share that to say that that's what I wanted to do. And you might too, but just try to be neutral and don't say much. Let them sort it out. 48 hours later, have a conversation. So what'd you think? So what I want to talk about, the last thing I want to talk about visiting schools, is what to do when you can't tour. Now, you can't tour for a variety of reasons. Sometimes you might say, we're kind of going to go to the 10 o'clock tour at Tufts, but we can't get to the 12 o'clock tour at Northeastern. We can't physically do it. So we have to pick. Are we going to do the 12 o'clock at Northeastern or the 10 o'clock at Tufts? We can't do both. So there are tour logistics between schools that, you just can't. There's no way to fight them. So often when you're saying out, if you say we're going to go out on a 3-day college visit trip, you got to start to pick. Which campuses are we touring? Which campuses are we not touring? The other scenario that will happen is you're all set and you are good to get to the tour, and then there's a flat tire or a traffic jam or something happens and you miss the tour. And that is also very real. I've been on a lot of college tours, and like there's always somebody like running in and like dragging younger siblings, and they're all like, it's just how it goes. And then the third scenario might be like, you just like, hey, you know what? I didn't realize we're driving and we're passing this college. Maybe we should just stop and see. And so once you've been, I'm a firm believer that you can get a lot from a self tour, especially if you've been on 3 to 6 college tours, where you start to hear like, okay, everybody's got an ice cream bar. And I'm not faulting those tours. I'm just saying you can get a whole lot done by yourself in your own time. So when you can't tour, here are some suggestions. Do preview the school. If you know you're going up to Boston, and I keep picking on Boston, I don't know why, but if you know you're going up to Boston, read up on the schools. This is something your child should do to start to triage. Like, okay, I'd like to see 5 schools. Here's my top 2. If I have to start picking, these are the 2 that I want to really make sure I tour. Pull up a map. When you get to a school, if you've planned to be there or just happen to be stopping by, pull up a map. Everybody has a map online. And you can start to triangulate from there. Find the quad, find the student center, and get yourself into the middle of campus. I find a lot of campuses have like a loop on the outside to drive through that kind of gives you a starting point. Then you're going to park your car and like go, where's the middle of this campus? Where's like the center of campus? Get yourself there. Get something to eat, get a newspaper, get the vibe, go to the bookstore, talk to kids, see if you know anybody. I already said that, but you might think, hey, wait, there is somebody we could reach out to. Some great questions to ask students on campus, if you're just saying, hey, what do you think about the school we're visiting, is, what's something that surprised you here? What is something here that you really love? What is a challenge at the school that somebody might not know right away? What is something or some place on campus that we really ought to see? What's the best thing about this school? Chatting up kids around you is a great way to get information. Go to admissions, even if you're just stopping by, even if you missed the tour and you're embarrassed, even if you go to admissions. If it is business hours, the admissions office will be open, and your student should go in and they should do the talking, not like me at Vermont Law School answering the questions. Your student should go in and they should say, introduce themselves and just say, I'm here. I'm from New Jersey. I go to this school. I'm a junior. I'm a senior. They will take the conversation from there. Oh my gosh, here. And they will have like a little card, and you fill out the little card, and that's demonstrated interest. That card's going to go to the regional rep, and they're going to see, oh, this kid from this school was here. And they will probably have a little map, and they'll say, here, do you want a water? And they want you to come see their campus. So even if you can't go on a tour, you should absolutely go to admissions and say, we're here. And, even if you have questions, you could ask them. Many schools, now it is not business hours, many schools have, even in their vestibule, a place where you can sign in after hours or on a Sunday, where you can fill out a little card, and they've got a little map and say welcome, and you can still kind of check in and get some information and show that you were there. Many schools also in the COVID era put online self-tours on their website. So you might be able to go to their admissions website and see if they have a walking tour or a driving tour. There's one more thing about showing up there, going to their after hours. Oh, and then the last thing is, if you go there and it's after hours and there's no way to say, I was here, Monday morning, get on that school's website, call admissions, find out who your regional representative is, and send them an email and say, hey, the student, not the parent, hey, I was there, I visited, I really liked it, I hope I can get back and take a tour, or are you coming to my campus? Because I think I'm very interested. That's another way to demonstrate interest. Say, I was there. certainly you should figure out, if your child is a weightlifter, go to the gym. If your child is into theater arts, go see where that might be. Student centers often have a lot of offices in them, like student government, the newspaper, LGBTQ, the ski club. They often have offices in the student center where you might even be able to poke your head in and ask a question about programs of interest to your student. Just a word to the wise, like, gyms are often like, a lot of campuses buildings are like card entry. So if you're going to enter a building like a gym, which, that would be a logical thing to maybe want to see. And if you say to a student, hey, or say to security, can we come in? It's probably going to be okay. But you don't want to be like stranger danger, breaching buildings, and be that too. You got to kind of, read the situation and see where you are, and if that's okay. I think that there is a tremendous efficiency to self-touring. There's only so many hours a day. There's only so much time. So if you can start to sort out, if you can get to a couple of formal tours where you can start to do the Goldilocks, this one's too big, that one's too small, this one's just right, and start to get a sense of really what suits your child. I think self-touring really has a lot to be said for it. In some cases, it might be the only way you can see certain schools. And if you really like it and you didn't get to tour it, maybe, and it really is, the more you read about it, your child's really excited about it, maybe you can figure out a way to go back. But I think that self-touring with jobs, sports, all the obligations parents have. I mean, unless you're retired and own a helicopter, this becomes very complicated for families to start to sort out. One last tip, and this could be a good parent role. Take pictures. If you're going to try to see 3 schools in a day, take pictures. And the first picture you take should be of like something that says that school's name. Like if you're in Pennsylvania touring and your first school's Villanova, your first picture, something says Villanova. Then you take pictures as you go. And I think that it's fine to take notes too. And I think this could be like a good parent job, just quietly and obtrusively taking some notes. So a week later, when you're like, wait, which one you have that information, then you go to the next school, you take a picture of something that says the school's name, take some notes, because a week later, it'll all start to blend a little bit. So taking some notes is good. I will tell you that the worst tour I ever went on was a very selective school in Washington, D.C., where there is no parking, and there could be parking. They could arrange for parking, but they don't. And you're parking on little side streets, like at people's houses. And we had a 2:00 tour, and at 2:10 on a 100-degree summer day, we walked in, and this completely uninterested person at a desk said, "Can I help you?" And my child said, "We're here for the 2:00 tour." And they told us we had to wait outside. We could not stay in the office. It didn't leave a great taste. The best school, and I'll give them a shout out for this, Trinity College in Hartford. I just stopped there with one of my kids. We rolled in. We hadn't planned on it. The beauty of most admissions offices is that they do have signs, like as soon as you start to approach campus, there's like arrows for admissions. We got ourselves to admissions. No tour, needed a bathroom. We kind of rolled in. It was like they were a hospitality unit waiting for us. They were like, "Hello." And we're like, "Do you have a bathroom?" Like, "Come on this way. Do you want a cold water?" And then they kind of gave us a bunch of information. And I said, "Is there anywhere we can eat?" And this one rep said, "I'll walk you over to the cafeteria that takes cash." Like, it was like they were waiting for us. And Angel Perez is the head of the National Association of College Admissions Counseling. But at the time, he was the dean of admissions at Trinity. And I always thought that was just such a great testament to his leadership, that his admissions office was just like, "Hey, how you doing? Come on in, bathroom, cold water, let's go." So anyway, that is my thoughts on how to go see schools effectively in the time that you have. Are there any questions? Anybody want to chime in with something in the chat or out loud? All right. Now, all those articles are on my Facebook page, Two River College Consulting and August Consulting. This also, I put all these on my YouTube channel, which is August Consulting College Planning Solutions. So if you want to see this again or tell somebody else, and that's where that will be. And people who ask me for copies, I will be emailing you copies. So if there's no questions, I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you for coming, and I'll be back in October.
We have a question.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my daughter's a junior. The PSAT is October 11th.
Mm-hmm.
The SAT dates at RFH are March 9th, June 1st, and October 7th. So October 7th is out because she's taking the PSAT the 11th. So when would the suggested date be for, I guess, March or June? Like,
Okay. Are you asking me if she should test this fall? Like take the actual SAT this fall?
Well, no, because she's missing it. The PSAT is in October 11th.
Yeah.
They are given one of those
a practice
samples.
Test. Yeah.
A practice digital test.
I would do that. I would absolutely do that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So then her date for SAT, you would suggest March or June as a junior, or at the end of the year, or if you want to take it twice, maybe, right? If you don't do so good the first time.
The SAT, I would certainly, if your child is not deep in an athletic season, I would be wanting to take that March 1st online SAT. I think that's probably a good move. Okay. The SAT typically is administered in the spring in March, May, and June. Then they go August, November, December. So there's plenty of time. I wouldn't stress about that. I would take the practice test at school. Why not? Start to see what the online SAT is all about. The juniors taking the PSAT this year will be taking the first online PSAT too. So we can talk more about that. Give me a call.
Right.
Okay. Other questions? Unmute. If you have a question, I will I'm going to, okay. If anybody else going to unmute and ask a question, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me about anything I've said. All right. I am going to sign off and thank you for coming.